Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me, as always, is...
It's me, Sal, everybody. I'm happy to be here tonight, as always.
Still has not changed his name.
Never. You know how that goes.
Mondo Salrician.
Yeah.
But we're hoping. Fingers crossed. So today, last time we were on, we were talking, I had said before... that we had some little people stories.
Yeah, I mean,
and the one or two that I had out of the backbone.
Well,
Devil's Backbone.
I was hoping, that these little people stories, we could have gotten them in, but obviously we couldn't. But hey, guess what? We're getting them in today.
And little people. Let me just talk about the little people. We're talking elves, dwarves, Winde, imps. Any kind of little people, leprechauns, goblins, some people call them trolls. Now, goblins and trolls, I could do a show just based on that, the gnomes.
You got stories for that?
I got stories for all of that, absolutely. But I don't know what to call them or classify them. I know that there is an area up in northern upstate New York,
yes.
I think it is. And it's called... it's a triangle. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, there are legends of these little creatures.
Are you referencing the Bridgewater Triangle?
The Bridgewater Triangle. Yeah. My mind was like, well, yeah, the Bridgewater Triangle, absolutely. In fact, folks, there's a documentary on Amazon Prime.
Oh, wow.
About the Bridgewater Triangle, and it is a really neat show. It's a good show about the Bridgewater Triangle.
I'm sure Chris Edge knows about that.
Oh, I'm sure he does. The creatures up there, though, I can't remember the name of what they were called, but we'll get to that in a minute. We're going to plug our emails, daswolfman88@gmail.com. Send us your stories. If anybody has a story out there, daswolfman88@gmail.com.
Oh, yes.
DASWOLFMAN88@gmail.com.
Yes, sir. And as always, we're spelling it out so that way you get it correct. We're not insulting your intelligence because that's not what we're doing. We just want your story. If you got a story, we want to hear it. That way we can put it on the show and we'll get to it as fast as we can. So with that said, what do we got tonight, Wolf?
Like I said, the little people.
Which one's the first one? I'm ready to hear it.
The first thing we're gonna do, I have a really quick. I know that you guys want to hear the stories about these little people. I have a quick UFO story.
Oh, well, hey, let's
not gonna
put it out there.
I just wanted to, just so you guys know, because there's people saying, "Hey, you don't do UFOs." Well, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And this is really close to here. A person that I talked to out of Kyle, Texas. It's not far from here, and they were. This was about 20 years ago. They said. Living way out in the country, but now it's like there is no country out there. It's all sprawl. No country for old men. There's no country for any men out there. It's all just urban sprawl, brother.
Yeah, man.
But she said that they lived out in the country and that they were driving home from Austin, heading home. And I'm not going to give too much of the location because I don't want them being whatever. And so it was her and her daughter, and there was no missing time or anything like that. But this craft, I guess you could call it, they saw it kind of streak across the sky and then stop. And then it started to grow, as she said, larger. It got closer and closer to their vehicle. And then there was like a light that went through her vehicle and it went over the top of their vehicle. And they were blinded, literally. They couldn't see. And so they just kind of pulled over to the side of the road. And I asked her over and over again, did you experience anything like missing time? Was there any kind of, she said no, not that she was aware of. It was like they just scanned her.
Yeah.
And then it was like, poof, it was over.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And she did not know which direction it went. It was just like, it was gone. Like it almost like it disappeared. Like it got sucked into the sky.
That's crazy.
So that one was a crazy one. And she had just reminded me, that I had said at one point that I would like to talk about that one day, and so then I was.
Yeah.
So that I don't know what I would do if something came down and started scanning me with a light. I don't, because to me we're like ants.
Yeah,
we're very diminutive to
compared to what they say those craft are.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that's really interesting. I got a quick one for you. There's a guy that I know that he told me that when he used to work out in the oil fields out in West Texas, in eastern New Mexico area. He said that one night, and this is how short the story is, he said he was driving home from, having been out on the job site for 2 straight weeks. So he's driving home. He said it was late in the evening, and he was going down this long highway. And of course, out in West Texas, east New Mexico, you got long straightaways out there, right? He said he was doing about 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, this light came out, and he could see it, and it kept up with him. And he said, I tried to speed up. He said, I went up to 75, almost 80 miles an hour. He said, it stayed right with me. He said, I'd watched it for a little short time. And the next thing you know, he said, that thing just shot off to the right.
Wow.
And he said, it was gone. And the guy told me, he said, yeah, I went home, told my wife, and she thought I was crazy. He goes, but I swear up and down, that's what happened to me.
Wow. That's
I was
amazing.
like, wow.
My guy that does my hair, my barber, he told me that he hadn't seen a whole lot of stuff in his life. We've talked about my show and things like that. And he told me that he saw a UFO when he was like 8 years old, 7, 8 years old.
Wow.
And that he got up to get a drink of water and he saw what looked like a bright star in the sky. And then it just shot off real quick. And like, it just, like it like shot off and like it just took off real fast. And then it just like appeared in another spot in the sky and then it was gone.
Oh, man.
And, and how do you, because aircraft don't move that way.
No, not any conventional human man-made
Nothing that
thing
we
that
have.
we know. Yeah. I mean, we're still stuck with, jet engines. All we've done.
The only person that can move like that I've seen is Superman.
Yeah, and
I've seen him do it too. I watched him in
cartoon.
that one where he fought Batman. Dude, he was moving like.
Yeah.
And then him and that other guy was on their General Zod.
Yeah.
Whew. So anyways, that though, I have no confirmation whether or not Superman is actually able to do that or if they're just doing that with some sort of tricks with the cameras. I'm going to look into that though, folks. Anyways, but we were talking about the Bridgewater Triangle, the Pukwudgie. That's what those little people are called. I was stammering earlier trying to figure out what it was. They're the Pukwudgie. So I'm going to start you off with a story. Like I'm going to tell you a quick story that I got from the little people. Now, this to me, it looked like an elf. I don't know, an elf, I guess. There was a family that was camping up in Oregon, and there's a lot of nice, beautiful places to camp up in Oregon. Believe me, I've been up there several times. And they were camping up in Oregon, and the daughter and the son were playing or whatever near where they'd camped out, and the adults. There were 4 adults and 2 children. The adults were all sitting around at a little makeshift table, and they were talking, and the children kind of wandered off. Oh. And now,
well, children, they're playing.
Children wander off, and they don't go call CPS. The parents found them pretty quickly. They said that they wandered off, and this was what was told to me by a woman. She said that her children saw a little skinny, diminutive creature with blonde hair sitting on a stump, holding what looked like a stick to its mouth. But that they didn't hear any music, but that it kept putting it up to its mouth, and the dog seemed to be reacting. Like they had a small dog with them, I think a Jack Russell Terrier.
Oh, wow. And
that the dog, like, was when this thing would put the stick to its mouth, they didn't hear noises. But the dog apparently did. The dog would stop and kind of run around in circles. And then when it would stop and look at them, the dog would continue to move toward the little creature. And then it would do it again. And then the dog would stop and kind of circle around. That's interesting to me because what I'm thinking is maybe there's a different frequency that this thing was playing on this flute or whatever you want to call it, but the kids could not pick up on it because
we have dog whistles.
Dogs can hear at a different frequency than we can, and that was odd. And so the dog, and then eventually it did it continually, and then the dog laid on the ground and rolled around. Oh. And then this little person, whatever you want to call it, elf, creature, had pointy ears and a pointy little nose, according to the kids. It continued to play the flute, I guess you want to call it.
That silent little...
walking backwards and eventually disappeared into a tree.
Wow, that's mind-blowing.
And then of course the oldest kid was like 11 or 10 or something, and the youngest one was like 6, I believe. But I mean, I don't know. What do you make of that? That's a crazy story, folks. But anyways, that's a story that I got from Oregon. And so on that video with the Bridgewater Triangle, there was a guy who came on that show, and I think he was on another show. I think it was Monsters and Mysteries or something. One of them shows on
one of them big shows,
Destination America or something like that. And I remember watching something about him. And he was an older guy, and he seemed like he was pretty, like he was sincere. He was talking about what had happened to him. Speaking of the Pukwudgies, I can't remember the name of the triangle or the creatures, but and I remember that he was on that video though, and the Pukwudgie, he was walking his dog. Yeah. And I remember that he ran into this like diminutive little creature. He said it was hairy, and it was short. And it was kind of standing out in the middle of the trail where he was walking. Now, this happened up in New England, somewhere up in New England, wherever the Bridgewater Triangle. I think it's
around the New Jersey area,
New York or something like that.
New Jersey area, somewhere around there.
Is it? I thought it was New York. I'm pretty sure it was
New Jersey, New York. They're right beside each other, real close.
Well, upstate New York is not New Jersey. So
no.
So, folks, if you at home want to look it up, don't, because I don't want me or Sal to be like, y'all are lying. I don't know. You don't know. I don't know. Anyways, it's up there, and so the guy was walking and with his dog, and his dog kind of stopped, and that just the story I remember was that one of these little creatures like was beckoning him, and he was saying "Kier, Kier, Kier" like that. That's how the guy was saying that he was talking too. You can look this up, and he said that when he thought about it later on, he thought that it was saying "come here," but it was saying "Kier, Kier," and it was talking.
Oh wow!
And then it said "Chi wan chu, Chi wan chu," and then he said that what he thought it was saying was "come here, we want you."
Ooh.
And that he saw it, and it kept like trying to beckon to him.
Oh man!
I know that whole thing is weird. Like that kind of ties into. I know that the Pukwudgies are like it was like a Native American myth.
Yes.
And that they are considered to be by the Native Americans like troublesome, and like kind of mischievous and bad. And that I know that the whole fairy lore, and we're going to do an episode on that. Definitely, I got some stories for you about that. But that's kind of tied into that, where these little mischievous spirits. I know there was a book about how you're not supposed to eat anything or drink anything when you encounter them because you'll miss time.
Oh.
And I actually have a guy that he gave me a story that happened to him as a child.
Wow.
And so that was weird. Like, this guy told me this story a long time ago. But that whole corridor, I think, is full of those like Pukwudgie stories and the little people. And we're not so much going to talk about little people today as we're going to talk about little critters, little creatures. Yeah. Or
little people will be included.
Little monitos.
Monitos. Yeah.
As the Mexicans call them, little monitos. I know that there was another weird, this is just a real little tidbit. My friend, who is now a tattoo artist, he's a good friend of mine. In his house, he collected the little dolls, they're not dolls, they're Kachina dolls, I think what they're called. Maybe they are dolls. They're little Kachina dolls.
Are you talking about the ones that stack on top of each other?
No. Those are Russian dolls.
Oh, yeah. That's
the
right.
Kachina dolls, I believe they're like some sort of Native American doll or something.
Okay, yeah.
He had one in his house, and it I might get him to talk about it one day, because he also had some experiences in the house.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe he can come on and just talk about a bunch of little paranormal stuff. But he had this doll that was like a Kachina doll, and it was like a little man, but it would move.
Oh, that's true.
And like it would move from one shelf to another.
Whoa.
And I know that his uncle had claimed that he saw it moving around. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It was like this, speaking of little men.
Yeah, little men, little creatures, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that I had a buddy of mine years ago that was ex-military, real tough guy, and told me that when he was a kid, that's like just a real quick story, but he said that he saw like his little action figures move, which may be something a little different, like spiritual or something.
I would say that's spiritual.
Yeah, but he was like, he said he would see these like some little small things move. Anyway, the whole idea of something small and diminutive moving around that's not supposed to be is creepy to me.
Just the thought of that gives me a little bit of the willies.
It is creepy. And my cousin had a story where he said something about there was an electrical storm, but this ties into a Ouija board, but they saw something small. And folks, we'll talk about that story one day. We will get into that. I want to get back with him about the details on that, because he had a girlfriend at the time that was playing with Ouija board, and all kinds of weird stuff happened. And one of the things that happened was there was a small entity that started appearing.
Oh, that.
So yeah, there's some creepy stuff out there, but we're gonna get going on some more stories.
So whatever happened to the guy with the Pukwudgie?
On the Bridgewater?
Yeah.
Well, he's now the king of the Pukwudgies.
Well, I don't know if I'd try
He's
to be
their leader,
king.
dude. If you go over there, he's 6 a month. No, I'm just kidding. No, that old guy, he got away. I mean, like, he didn't go with them, obviously, because he's lived. Obviously, folks, he didn't go with them, so he's living to tell the story. That's why I believe he's able to tell the story. I honestly think that if you do go with them, you're not seen again.
Yeah.
Or like the legends they say of the fairies or the fays or whatever, if you go with them,
you won't be
you'll
seen
drink
again.
for a night, and then the next day it'll be 70 years in the future,
kind of
and
thing,
all your tax debt will be gone, and you will not have to deal with any of the nightmares that are. I'm just kidding. No, seriously, no. I hear that people have missing time, and like I've heard people were
a lot of strange.
That's weird because the missing time thing is kind of like the whole UFO thing.
Yeah, but it's hard to tell what entities have, whether technological or natural abilities to make you lose time, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
Maybe these little creatures have some kind of, or
Magic?
maybe he was dinner. Maybe they were going to take him and eat him. And
I would say that would be the first thing that they were probably going to try to do.
He was smart, and he was like, I'm not going with you, dude.
Yeah.
And he's, he left, especially considering that,
I thought you were going to tell me that the guy, after all the talking and it came up there and smacked him in the shin or in the knee or something, with a stick or something. Yeah.
Well, I got a story about that too, but we're not going to get into that today. But
all right.
That's a bigger segment I'm going to do about what a little girl was calling a leprechaun, an evil leprechaun.
I can't wait to hear that one, brother.
Yeah, and so we'll get into that one day. That's going to be a whole nother show. But the club, we were talking about the club.
Yeah, you got to get into that story, brother. Maybe
that's what the Pukwudgies want. They want them to go to the club.
Okay, dude. Little creepy, evil creatures. That's I don't know. Where do you go with that?
Little monitos, as they say in Spanish.
Duendes.
Duende. Yeah, that was creepy. I'm not gonna lie. Speaking of a club downtown, now I've talked to you before about some of the haunted. A lot of these clubs downtown, folks, on 6th Street,
happen there.
They're very old. The club I used to work at used to be a blacksmith.
Oh,
they had a blacksmith, and then there was like another club I worked at that I didn't really work at there very much. The club I was at was the home base, but the same people that owned and operated, and they had one that used to be a stable. And one that was a brothel. And there's one downtown, Hang'em High Saloon, that's just straight up haunted. And my friend Squid had some encounters down in there when he was bouncing there years ago.
Wow, the
restrooms. The restrooms have some weird stuff that happened, but that's ghost stuff. What we're going to talk about now.
Continue talking
about. A friend of mine had what I can only describe as a little goblin type creature that would take ice out of the ice machine.
Well, hey, that qualifies as a little creature.
A little critter. And so what ended up happening was one day we were talking, a friend of mine, he owned a club downtown on 6th Street, and he was telling me that he had a manager that had quit abruptly
out of nowhere,
had been there for about a month and a half, and that she was just not going to come back because she witnessed a strange entity. And now everybody knows I've always been kind of into these weird things. And so he told me, and so I got in touch with her. She ended up going and working at another bar. Now, let me just explain. 6th Street is nothing but bars.
Yeah.
Nothing but bars and clubs and dancing and
a lot of those buildings have been
drinking
there for
and
a
fighting
long time,
and whatever.
And they got their own history, huh?
They sure do. And so I went and I talked to her, and I'm not at liberty to say her name because I didn't get permission for that, because she may still be working. I think she still works on there part-time. Mm-hmm. But anyways, she actually had a story. She was there doing paperwork. She'd only been there for about 6 weeks.
Oh.
And she had already started hearing noises, like what she thought was something moving around in the back, something that was like making disturbing sounds. Like she thought one time she heard a sigh. Or like a moan. Yeah. And she said it was kind of faint, and she thought it was coming from the wall. And in the office where that office was at, it was like there was like a little makeshift office. There was one door you go in, and then the other door goes out, and then there's like a closet that has like a bunch of where they keep the
all the
soda syrup and all that. Yeah, and then there was like there was I'm trying to remember how what else it was like. They kept like supplies, but then there was a door that went out to the right from there. So, anyways, that's where she was at, and the doors were open, and she heard something in that back closet one day in particular, and she was like, "Is that a rat?" And then she thought maybe it was a ghost. Is this place haunted? What's going on with this? So she goes into that utility closet area, and like I said, there was a door that went to the right. Yeah. So she sees this thing come around the bar, little tiny thing, a little bitty. She said it was like maybe the size of a rat, but it was on 2 legs, and it would.
We're looking at maybe 6 to 8 inches tall, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like the size of like a He-Man action figure, maybe. Okay. I don't know.
6 inches, yeah.
When she lifted up like the hands off the bar,
yes,
I would say 6 inches, but she kind of moved them up and down, and I'm like, okay, well, which is it? And she's like, I don't know. It moved so quickly, but she said that it was moving really fast, and it had like both of its arms out in front of itself, and it looked like it was wearing like tattered clothing, and it had a little red cap on its head, and she's like, and she stopped at that point, and she's like looking at me. I've known her for a long time. She's like, Wolf, I know you think I'm crazy. I said, no, I don't think you're crazy. I just want to hear your story. I'm not here to make fun of you, and because everybody knows I like to joke and laugh. She's like, why? I said, not here to make fun of you.
Did you explain to her that you've had
I explained to her that I collected creepy stories, and I didn't. She's like, what are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll publish it. I don't know. And she said, well, just don't say my name. That's fine. But I said, okay. So anyways, she was telling me this, and she said that it ran just really quickly on the ground, carrying what looked like an ice cube, like a big piece of ice.
Yeah. Must have been hot, you know.
Well, that's funny because she did say it was summertime when this happened, and summertime in Texas is pretty brutal.
Obviously, it had figured out that, you know, this is ice. I get it from here. Normally, nobody ever sees it, so maybe that day was just.
Maybe it was a little ice thief. Maybe
obviously it was, but you know,
maybe it was different ones.
Well, yeah,
and that was his turn to go get the ice.
That you never know.
How did he get up into the ice machine, though? I mean, he's so small. Like,
yeah, but who knows how well they can jump? I mean, there's the flea. The flea is teeny tiny, but can jump 13 feet. Mm-hmm. You know, in one.
So this thing can jump like a flea?
Quite possible. Oh, well, not like a flea, but have the ability to jump. Just like, you know, the stories
Fraggle,
of the Goblins,
folks. If everybody remembers the Fraggles from the Fraggle Rock. I had a cousin that she was terrified of the Fraggles. Yeah. She wouldn't watch it. She was I
got a family member whose daughter is deathly afraid of clowns too. So this is all these fears.
Clowns are creepy anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
and I know we got some of that in future episodes.
You got clowns like John Wayne Gacy. They hide their face so they can murder people. No, this was just a weird encounter, but this isn't the only time I've heard of something like that downtown.
Well, you know, it's understandable when you think about the age of the buildings and all that other good stuff. And even though you remodel, common sense says you can remodel, but if you've never found per se the way these little creatures come in and out, you could remodel something. And even if they do come in and out, and she said it looked like a little, the size of an action figure, like you said, a 6-inch action figure. That implies that it is shaped the way we are, arms, legs.
Humanoid shape.
Yeah, humanoid shape. So
absolutely.
Who's to say they don't have little tools, or maybe their little hands have little claws that are strong enough to rip through drywall or any of that other
Well, the thing was, she didn't get a good look at its face, and that was the first time encounter.
Oh, wow.
But there were more. Now, she said that on a couple other occasions, she thought she saw something running in the corner of her eye.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day she thought that she saw, and she's like, I thought I was losing my mind. She thought that she saw one of these things carrying something over its head.
Oh.
The same thing. And it like ran underneath her, and she looked and was like, whoa. And then she saw it, there were mirrors on either side of the walls, and she saw it in the mirror.
Oh.
And that there was like this weird looking, crevice in the wall that looked like it had been burrowed out kind of,
yeah. Uh-huh.
and that it squeezed through there.
Well, if it was thin, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I don't even. She said that it looked really weird how it squeezed through it too, like it was unnatural almost. That's what she said. And then that was all that she had told me. But let's move on. We have another encounter. Same district, 6th Street club, and then I know another club owner that actually did something with with the sage.
Yes,
had to actually burn sage because one of these critters, about the same size, was seen multiple times by bartenders that were opening the bar.
Wow. And
had a couple different managers that had experienced this. Now, the one manager, I knew him very well, and he had told me it didn't bother him. Like he said, it didn't really bother him. He was like, I'd seen these things in the corner of my eye. Saw one that ran up underneath a couch. And when he looked under the couch, it was gone, like it disappeared. But there was a hole in the floor.
Oh.
So,
you know, what you're saying, it sounds like to me, I mean, we don't know. Nobody really truly knows. Maybe they're able to really contort their body enough to where they could
slip in and out.
A real small crevice. Who's to say that they can't, and who's to say they can't? You know, they can or cannot. It's just, but the fact is, we don't know. But I tell you what, in my opinion, I would leave that suggestion open.
Here's another one I got for you. The same club. The other manager, though, told an even stranger story. He said that one night that he went to sleep in the upstairs loft area. They had a loft, and he got tired, so he went to sleep and dozed off. And he woke up to hearing like all this scuffling, scratching noises, whatever. And it sounded like there was some kind of commotion going on.
Right.
And he clicks on the light. There was a lamp right there. There was a couch, I guess, is what he was sleeping on. And he clicks on the lamp, and he sees one of these little creatures in Mortal Kombat with a rat.
Oh my God.
And that they were struggling, and it had like what looked like a little sort of sharp, like nail looking object. And he was pushing like the rat back with it. Yeah. And the rat had something like the claw was on top of something that looked like a piece of bread.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what, and he said it was crazy. And then this thing just like burned off, took off real fast and went into the wall, and that the rat kind of went its own way and took the bread.
Oh, wow.
So that, I don't know, dude.
That would have been
that's pretty crazy.
That would have been a trip. Just sit there and watch that, even for a second or two.
Yeah. And this guy, he told me that story because the other manager said, and they told me several stories, but they were all just real brief, like the bartender seeing something in the corner of her eye. One time, one of them claimed that, the boxes would have this, like I was saying, the soda syrup.
Yes.
That there was a little stab mark in one of them, and the soda syrup was dripping all over the floor.
Oh, wow. Like
something had stabbed it with like a tiny little object
maybe
or
like
something
the size of a needle, maybe.
Yeah, well, no, like a little stab mark. So I mean, like it was like a sharp, like little knife. The way that it was
it a slice.
The
up
way,
and down,
well,
or a stab?
like I said, I wasn't there, but I can tell you the way that it was described to me, and I can't show you people at home, but it was like they just kind of held their fingers up, maybe a quarter inch, like a little stab wound, about like that.
Wow.
So it wasn't a pinprick, obviously, but it was a slit.
Okay. Yeah.
And that there was soda syrup spilling out all over the place, and so that was weird. And it obviously had drained the bag to where the syrup was all over the ground.
Gosh.
Which I don't know if they were harvesting sugar.
Well, hey.
So what do you make of that? I mean, that's some weird stuff, dude. And then we're gonna move along here. I'm gonna take you out to West Texas.
Oh, hey, let's head out to West Texas with this story.
A lot of crazy stuff in West Texas.
A lot more than what people care to admit to. I'm fairly certain.
Well, yeah, there's a place out in West Texas as a little town called Marfa.
Yes.
Yeah. Now Marfa, my grandparents lived out there for a while, and I actually did a Dogman story about Marfa on a show on Vic Cundiff's show, Dogman Encounters. I did a show about Marfa, and so when I was a little kid, I would go out there to visit my grandparents in Marfa, and they lived in an adobe house.
No, they still lived in an adobe house?
Well, they had a lot of them out there. They probably still have them out there, I'm sure.
My dad's parents lived and died in an adobe house.
Well, they're nice and cool.
Oh yeah, they are. In the
they
summer.
keep you cool in the summertime, and they're warm enough in the winter. It's a pretty ingenious. But anyways, they lived in an adobe house, and when I was little, never saw anything. Like I never saw anything weird in that house. I always felt really uncomfortable in the front room. We always entered through the back, but the front was like the front door, like where the mail and everything was delivered.
Yeah.
The front room was always kind of creepy. And I would always hear like what I thought were little footsteps whenever I'd be playing with my toys and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so usually going to visit grandma and grandpa was pretty relaxing for me. I got away from a lot of things I didn't like in my life, like certain kids that I didn't like in my neighborhood and stuff. And so I was able to get away from living in, wherever. And then when I was younger, real young, the monotony of living out in the country too, and then so over the years, I just really enjoyed going out and visiting them. It was always a pleasant time. But we had a neighbor that lived down the street, a kid that I would play with, and there were two brothers. One was my age and one was just a little bit younger. And I remember them saying that they had a little goblin that would come out and steal the little weapons off of their little men, off their little G.I. Joe men.
Toys and stuff.
Yeah, and then one day they found a hole in the back of their closet, and that they stuck the older brother got the little brother to stick his hand in that closet and pull out
whatever was
was in there, and this kid pulled out a couple of the little missing weapons.
Oh, for the toys?
Yeah, and this was weird. I mean, he said that he reached back in there to grab whatever was in there, which is I wouldn't do that. There's no telling what's in there, and something bit him.
Oh.
So obvious reaction. The kid pulls his hand back and is like, starts crying. So, and he says, but then he started crying, and it's been so many years now. The kid's name was, I believe, Chris.
Yeah.
And he and his little brother started crying. I think his little brother's name was like Bobby or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was really strange. And I always wondered if there was any truth to that story. And they said that they saw like this little goblin looking creature, and it wore like a little red hat. Oh. I don't know what that is. There's a theme there. And then I heard, so when we went to visit some friends that owned a store in Mexico in Candelaria through Pinto Canyon, we'd go through the winding canyon. And I asked one of the adults that was there if they knew anything about these little creatures or whatever, and of course the duende.
The duende, yeah.
But the duende are actually a little taller.
Yeah.
But that there's another race of creatures or whatever, and I believe they call them like rojo cabeza, which is like redheads, but they have like little red caps apparently. They're not just redheaded.
I think a lot of people would probably look at that, with the little red cap. Everybody sees the little statues of the gnomes, and they got that little hat, and a lot of times they have them, they have red hats on them. So, that's really interesting. I mean, you got all these different little creatures, but I will say this about these little type creatures that are humanoid in shape. If we have all these different types of dogs, people are all different types of people, why
not different races of
little people?
Little people, yeah. And so they said that there was like a race of beings, And now that whole place over there in Candelaria, they had a store, and then up on this hill that looked like somewhere you couldn't even get to, there was a cemetery on top of there.
Yeah.
And they claimed that there were these little coyotes that could stand on their hind legs, and they moved around like men.
Wow.
Now, I've talked about that on Vic's show too, that my grandfather would see them.
Yeah, you get to thinking about that. I mean, there's so many mysteries throughout this world that we don't know of, and unfortunately in today's world it seems like a lot of people don't want to know. Their minds aren't inquisitive. They'd rather get stuck in their world where they're looking at what all the celebrities doing and all that nonsense versus going out and exploring what's in your world. I mean, as kids, just like I do, you grow up out in the country, and TV.
They get caught up in the
TV was not an option, to sit there all day in front of it. No, you wanted to get
now
outside.
they live in the world of fax machines and Nintendo Power Glove and cassette tapes.
Yeah, and
it's easy to get caught up in the modern world.
No, that's we're 30 years behind with that comment. Now we're in the VR generation with those VR
I know.
gloves.
I'm not living in the past, people. I know where I'm at.
Hey, but I'm in
1989, right? This is where we're at. Cowboys were 1-15.
1979.
Horrible.
1979.
No, Cowboys were 1-15 in 1989.
Oh no, but I'm in 1979.
That's where you're at.
They were awesome.
They were awesome.
Yeah,
they were
awesome.
Ed Too Tall Jones and Harvey Martin. Hey, so anyways, the one thing that you're talking about, how people it's so hard for them in their mundane life, day-to-day life. You go to work, you come home. You go to work, you come home. When things start happening, because people are habitual, people are habit-forming creatures.
Yeah, creatures.
When things start to pop off, I should say.
Yes.
It's hard for people to wrap their mind around it because they're like, this is not the norm. This is not what's happening in the normal world. And it breaks the monotony of your normal world. And then it starts to be like uncomfortable because the exchange for monotonous whatever is security.
Yeah.
You feel secure in your little world, and then a little creature comes out and cuts a lock of your hair and then goes out the window, because that's what happened in the next story I'm going to tell you. Oh, really?
Yeah,
this story here, this was a guy that actually, he was a friend of mine. He had a body shop around here. I'm not going to say where, but he owned a body shop. He's a good friend of mine, a good friend of my brother's, a good friend of all of ours. And he had a guy that worked for him. And he told me a very bizarre story, because the guy that is one of my brothers that had the body shop, he's literally one of my best friends. He said, tell Wolf your story, because everybody knows I like to hear these stories.
Yeah.
And he said when he was 8 years old, that they lived in a house out in I'm trying to remember the name of the town. It's right outside of it's in West Texas. I know that.
Yes.
Anyways, I can't remember the name of the town. But anyway, it's a small town out in West Texas.
Yeah.
And I know that it's not that far from where I used to live. I'm trying to remember the name. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Fort Stockton?
No.
Big Spring?
Big Springs. Oh my gosh, I almost yelled. I was trying to say Dripping Springs. That's out here.
Yeah.
No, Big Springs. Yeah. Absolutely. And man, how'd you guess that? Anyways,
it's one of the big towns out there.
Yeah, it's one of the bigger towns out there. I guess because there's not a lot of them actually. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I couldn't remember the name of it, and I kept wanting to say Spring something, and I couldn't remember the name of it. Big Springs.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, there's a Big Springs is a pretty big town out in West Texas. Not big, but it's where a lot of they used to have a lot of cattle auctions and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, they did.
A lot of livestock. They have a big livestock show out there. So, anyways, he lived out in Big Springs, and when he was a kid, he was like 8 years old. Something would come into his room at night.
Oh.
And his dad, unfortunately, would drink a lot. And so his dad, he couldn't get up and go and cry to his mom and dad, because his dad would be like, shut up, go back to your room.
Yeah.
His mom and dad were fighting. Well, to make matters worse, he had this creature, this thing that would climb. The first time he saw it, it climbed in through his window.
Oh.
And he opened his eyes and he saw it to his right. And they had bunk beds. His sister, I guess, she slept on the top bunk.
Uh-huh.
Always slept through these encounters, never did wake up or anything. And that this thing came up to the side of his bed the first time and was like sniffing him. And this kid, whose eyes were just barely open enough, where you pretend like you're asleep and you're not, he said he could see it. And he said it smelled like rotten garbage, and it had this awful dead smelling breath. And that it was sniffing his head. And that it had a small little knife with it.
Oh, man.
And he was thinking, oh, my gosh, do I scream? Do I kick it? What do I do?
Uh-huh.
And he said it was probably about 2.5 feet tall.
Oh, man.
And he said that it was like up in his face, like standing up, like kind of tippy-toed up in his face type of, whatever. And he said that it looked like it was leaning forward, and it was just like inspecting him. And it had this little knife. He said it had a little pouch. And he said he goes, I was not into make believe. He's like, nothing else ever happened to me in my life other than this incident,
Oh, man.
And he said that this thing was debating about what it was going to do to him. And then it turned the knife upside down to where it was like in a stabbing motion.
Right, in a position.
And he said that it lifted its hand, and at that point, he opened his eyes wide because it scared him, and the thing kind of gasped and backed up and then kind of looked around like, what do I do? And then it just bolted.
Wow.
And he said that it just bolted out the window, and he realized that the window had been opened, So there was a lock on the window, but he couldn't lock it completely.
Right.
So he said that one of the problems was that his dad, like he had asked his dad after that to please fix that, and his dad wouldn't do it. Because, of course, you're dealing with an alcoholic. They're useless people, literally. And so he was just like, yeah, my dad's an alcoholic. He wouldn't do anything, wouldn't fix anything. I began to complain to my mom. When my mom actually brought it up to my dad hit her.
Oh.
So I just quit bringing it up. I just had nowhere to turn. I couldn't do anything. He said it was a horrible situation. His little sister, luckily, did not
She never
experienced any of this.
Oh, wow.
The second encounter he had, the same thing. He heard heavy breathing. He turned over. He saw this creature. Now, this is when we get into the description of it.
Okay.
He said that it had greenish skin.
Oh.
Was also brandishing the knife again. The knife looked like it was frail. He said it looked like a little frail knife. Like it just didn't look like it would.
Kind of what, made out of tin or something?
Yeah,
like
he said
that?
it wasn't real big, wasn't real intimidating, but it was a blade nonetheless.
Yes.
And and I asked him, did you ever experience how sharp it was? Did it ever stick you or stab you? He said, well, here's the deal. I never got cut on my skin with it, but it cut a lock of my hair.
Oh.
Well, yeah. The weird thing was that it was standing at the on the side of his bed, and that it brandished this knife. And he said that it had these eyes that were almost like orange looking.
Oh.
He said like if you took like a red, the inside of the eye was kind of red, and they kind of illuminated it, but the rest of the eye was yellow.
Oh, man.
Then it's kind of bled in together almost to be orangey looking. He said when he would see it at a distance, it almost looked orange, but when it got up close, you could see the red in the middle. And he said it was just an ugly creature. Damn. And it had these jagged little teeth that, and he said it was just a horrible, and it had like this just gross looking overbite. And he described it, and he said that they had like a little scar on its face. And he said, I saw it clearly once or twice, just you could see it.
The same little creature.
Yeah, and he had a nightlight. He said that he had a nightlight.
Oh, okay.
And that whenever these encounters would start, it would move toward the nightlight and look over in his direction and then unplug it or turn it off, I should say. And so when he said that it would unplug or turn off the nightlight, and then it would creep toward his bed, and he would always pretend like he was asleep because it was just examining him, Mm-hmm. And he got a good look at it once with the nightlight, and so he was like, "What is this creature? What? You got a good look at it, And he said that in the dark, in his room, it was really dark. You could just kind of make out the shape. But one time, the nightlight, he saw it.
Oh, okay.
And so he said that this creature would continue to come to his room, and eventually one day he woke up feeling something pulling his hair. And when he turned, this thing had his little hand. He said it had little claws. Little nasty, dirty-looking claws, and that it cut a piece of his hair and then ran out the window again.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he said that most of the time it had like a little cap, like a little dirty brown cap on its head, but that one time it didn't, and it had little bumps all over its head that looked like horns, and like weird-looking little bat ears that stuck up. So the horns, I asked him about that. I was like, wow. I was like, horns?
Yeah. I'm saying spikes, but I'm thinking more what you're thinking, they're like little rounded off kind of spiky kind of thing, but not really horns. I don't know what.
He didn't say that they were like thorns on its head. It wasn't like
they weren't pointy.
Yeah, they weren't like Darth Maul or something, I guess. I don't know how you would say. That's all I could think of. Who would have horns on its head? I don't
kind of like that.
know.
Yeah, okay. So I get it, but just bumps. They were,
but the way he described it was they were a little small, little like. But
they were pronounced enough that he could tell that.
Yeah, because the way he described it was that it looked like it had horns, which was weird. Like maybe they were wore down or something.
Oh wow, that
because I did ask him about the horns, and it didn't. He didn't say that they were pronounced or big.
Wow, and that brings to mind, the recurring thing.
Nubs.
Nubs.
I guess that's a word you could use, like nubs.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm trying to think of the word he used, like nodules.
Nodules. Okay, yeah.
Like,
that's weird.
You
You could say pronounced bumps then, but going back to my thought that I was getting at is that the recurring thing, I've been hearing from these stories that you've told me about the little hat, right? They're wearing a little hat. It makes you wonder, what if these,
maybe they're wearing them because they have these ugly horns on their heads.
But thinking about the way a gnome is portrayed today, like people with garden gnomes, it's like this fat little friendly little thing.
With a red hat.
With a red hat or a little green hat, whatever color they color them. But it makes you think, could it have been transformed over time, legend? You know what I'm saying? People seeing these sightings and then somebody glamorized or romanticized, I think is the proper word, right? And they turn them into these little fat, lovable little things like you see in the cartoons about trolls or gnomes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
this sounds like a little goblin to me. And I have but
why would a friend of mine.
I don't know. I have a friend of my wife's. I would have to go back and talk to her again about it. So because she's going to talk to her friend more about it out in California. Wow. And she saw a goblin.
Like a
goblin creature. Yeah. And it involved like the dog chasing it.
How big was it? How big?
That's what I'm saying. She's going to go back and talk to her friend about it. So it's like I have to wait on that story, but I will get that to you guys. The other thing I was going to talk about, we have a friend, and I don't know if you want to tell the story, if you remember, that he told us a story of like a duende.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that was the witness.
Yeah, we let's just talk about his story. Well, just tell his story because we're not going to say his name or anything like that.
No. Yeah, that was, just to let everybody know, that was a witness that we both spoke to. So this is why I can tell the story. Now, this guy claimed that he was working at a factory, and they had a warehouse. So it was in South Austin, and he said that a lot of the workers, they were hiring workers left and right, and then they would quit when they had to go back and work at the warehouse. Now, he said the people that had to put stuff in the warehouse, well, that kind of work was done late at night. So he said after a lot of these people were quitting, they couldn't hire new people back fast enough. So one night, the manager asked him to, hey, you worked here most of the day. Can I have you for a little bit longer so you can help me take all this stuff back to the warehouse? So he said he didn't think much of it. And anyways, he volunteered to do it, and they went back there. And of course, for some reason, I don't remember exactly, but the manager couldn't go back there with him. So he decided to do it himself. And he took the inventory of the stuff back there, and he went in there and he opened up the door. He went inside, opened up the door, and then backed the vehicle up. And of course, he goes in there to put the stuff back in. He gets everything downloaded from that truck, and he goes to finish up his job, finish up the work, downloading, and then closing the doors. And then he had to go around and make sure all of the doors into that warehouse were secure because it was the last thing of the night. So when he did that, he went and got back in the vehicle. And right as he was getting back to the vehicle, he said he heard a crash. And so he said at that moment, he'd already heard the stories from the other people that had quit, so on and so forth, and all the talk around the shop, so to speak. And he thought, what in the heck? So of course, next thing you know, they get back the following day, and the manager told him, hey, somebody broke in, or so on and so forth. But all in all, this continued a few different times. And one time the manager brought him back there to try, because they were trying to figure out what was going on. They had video cameras in that warehouse, and that warehouse got it on film. This witness told us, yeah, I saw the film. He said, I'm watching the warehouse, and we got the video cameras on the doors. He said, we watched the door fly open. He goes, and we know they were locked. They flew open. And he said, as he's watching this one door, the manager points to the one particular door, because obviously the manager had already seen the video. And he says, hey, check this out. And as they're looking at that video and that door had flown open, in comes running this little, what did he say, about a foot and a half, 2 feet tall?
Yeah, it said just about a foot and a half.
Just shooting right in there. And of course, the witness said, up until that point, I really didn't know what to think. He said, but as soon as I saw that, he told that manager, no way, man, no, no. And he said the manager turned and looked at him and said, yes, dude, yes. and that's about, the extent of the story that happened to him, because he never actually saw it, but he did see the video of that little
You know
creature.
what? That's crazy. That story is crazy. I remember we sat down and talked to him.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story we got not too long ago, but I'll give you one. On that same region, that same area over there, that road, going down the road from there, may be the same type of thing.
It could be. I mean,
A couple of friends of mine back in high school claimed that some little creature looked like a little man, a little like 1 foot tall man, ran out in front of their vehicle, ran, and then they straddled it.
Oh, wow.
And then they looked at it in the rearview mirror in broad daylight and saw it like run into the field.
Oh, man.
And they always say, I played football with these guys, and they just swore up and down that that's what that was. I'll tell you, and then now I'll tell you another story. Guy that used to work for me, I'm not going to say his name because I haven't been in touch with him in years, but when I first started getting my company going, I was working out by the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working for millionaires out there.
Oh.
And one of the guys that I worked with, he's got a lot of property out there. He's a very, very wealthy person. But there was a guy that I worked with that worked for me, and we were having some weird stuff. My cousin was working for me too, and he kept hearing like stuff in the woods at night, and then my brother was working out there. And after a little while, my brother started hearing it too, and they thought maybe it was just some sort of like animal or something. Mm-hmm. This creature was a little bigger, though. I mean, not that an animal, but I'm saying bigger than what these people are describing, these 1 foot tall or little diminutive Fraggles or whatever. This thing was a little bigger. Now, one day, the guy that was working for me, I'll just call him John. I don't know.
Okay.
John was driving down the road, and he worked for us for a few months, and he said that he saw this thing climbing up onto the guardrail. Because there was like this little creek that you go over to get up to where we were at on Comanche Trail right there, and he saw this thing on this guardrail go up the like just lift itself up, like lifting itself up, putting its leg over, and the way he described it, he's like if you took Gollum from the Lord of the Rings and made him completely have no hair and kind of made his head a little bigger and his mouth a little more toothy.
Yeah.
Like with spiky teeth, you know? He said that's what it looked like.
Holy moly.
And now my brother and my cousin had both claimed, and another friend of mine that worked out there with us all had claimed that when they were sitting in their vehicles guarding the properties that were being built out there, that they were hearing something that sounded like it was running underneath their vehicle.
Oh, man. Well, you know, when you think about their diminutive size of these little creatures, whether they're elves, duendes, dwarves, whatever you want to call them, slipping in and underneath vehicles shouldn't be much of anything, you know, to them. And part of it, you know how people are. Human nature is out of sight, out of mind. So when you put that out there and you think about that a little bit more, if you don't, first of all, you don't believe that they exist, then you're not going to be looking for them in any way. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So out of sight, out of mind, and then comes the rest that follows after that. Because the more I think about this little people thing, I'm also reminded about that video floating around on YouTube about those guys that were in Indonesia, Malaysia, somewhere over there that they were riding those dirt bikes, and they had that little person run out in front of them, and they had their GoPro cameras on, and they caught, you know, the clip, and they chased it down until it took off into some high grass, and then they couldn't catch it after that. That little diminutive creature they had in there, you know, some people speculate it was approximately 3 feet tall, maybe a little shorter.
Well, you know, my wife showed me a video not too long ago of a diminutive creature that these dogs were trying to attack.
Oh, really?
And then it popped out to try to confront the dogs, and it got blown away. But it was on the video, and it was so weird looking. And I can't tell you which video. I'll have her show. I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Send me the link, man. I'd love to see that.
And
you know?
So anyway, that it's on YouTube. I know that, and there's a lot of people have seen it. But moving along here. I got another story. Friend of a friend that I actually did talk to this person too. This was back in the early 2000s when I talked to this person. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now, if you think I'm full of crap, let me tell you something. All of these stories, I've been collecting these stories for a long time. Since I was a young man, I've been interested in the paranormal, and this has always been like a sideline to me, like a hobby to me. And so, especially when you do security and you work down, I was working downtown at these clubs, You network, you meet so many people. Nearly every person I have ever met, I've asked them if they have had anything weird happen to me. And if they say no, well, I can almost guarantee you they would tell me, but I know someone who has, and that's where I got all these stories from. And I used to have tons and tons of journals of things that I'd written down of these stories that I had gotten from various people.
Wow,
But unfortunately, I had a vindictive ex that threw some of them in the fireplace.
Oh, man.
Of eyewitness accounts that I had gathered over the years that I had tried, the ones I tried to remember to write down, but thank goodness I have a good memory because I can remember a lot of them.
Well, that's
good. And so, plus, every time I go on the Vic's show or do any kind of TV, radio, whatever, I get inundated with stories too, which is
that's
neat.
Great.
But this person, I talked to him in person. And I finally got to, unfortunately, just to get a story, I had to sit through just an awful zombie movie. So he and his girlfriend invited me and my friend to go to the movies or whatever. So we did. It was a terrible movie. I think it was that Walking Dead something. Not Walking Dead, but it was the one the one where they were attacking the ivory tower or whatever. It was awful. I don't remember the name of whatever. It was just terrible. But anyway, I was there and I was watching this movie. And so as soon as it was over, I'm like, okay, so let's get to this story. Because he had a whole tale to tell. And I hope I got enough time to tell you this story. How much time do we got?
We got enough time for this little story?
I think we got enough time.
Let's hear it.
This story, I'll just tell you the cliff notes, or I'll give you one good encounter from them. We can come back to this. They were remodeling a house. Now, I tell you, when you remodel houses, whatever's in there comes out, okay?
Yeah.
A lot of weird stuff I've heard about people remodeling houses. Ghosts, whatever kind of goblins are around, whatever kind of...
you're stripping
vermin, spiders, whatever, it all comes out. We remodeled a house when I was a kid, and I got stung by a scorpion 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Let me tell you. So... they were remodeling, they were redoing a house, and my buddy of mine was helping them to redo the house. And so he told me they have a story, a really creepy story if you want to get it. And so I went and I asked these people about, what had happened. Now, they had a little girl, and as soon as the remodeling began, there was like a wall that used to separate hers from another room. They expanded that. They were expanding it and turning it into like a living area.
Yes.
And they were making it a lot bigger place.
Bigger room, knocking out a wall, basically.
Basically knocking out walls.
Oh.
And so the little kid was sleeping in that what was once the room or whatever, and they were just having to make do with what they were, because they didn't really have anywhere to go to remodel, so they were all having to
live.
Something started to go and mess with her at night.
Oh.
And it would say bad things in her ear. And the little girl started talking about all kinds of weird things that she had
there was no way
she could have known.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so whatever this was, she described it as a grotesque faced leprechaun.
Oh my God.
She kept calling it a leprechaun with an ugly face. So they actually got some pictures and asked her, does it look like this? Does it look like that? And she picked out a leprechaun, but made the face uglier,
Oh, wow.
And said that it looked like that, but it didn't have the hat, but it did have pointy ears, a beard, and a weird looking hair. And it began to talk to her about arguments that the mom and dad were having that weren't even on that property. Like when she was at school.
Holy moly.
And it was telling her, your mommy's going to leave your daddy doesn't like your mommy anymore, and telling that they were fighting, and today while you were at school, and giving her the conversation.
Sowing seeds of discontent.
And it was so weird. And she had an older brother, but nothing was happening to him. There was nothing going on with him. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. Wow. I could go on more about that whole situation there, but yeah, folks, there's some weird stuff out there.
There's a lot of these little small entities, and, we always get the romanticized, sanitized versions on television, but guess what? The truth is stranger than fiction. I've said that before, and I'll say it again.
Absolutely. So do you want to plug the email?
Hey, the email, as everyone is heard at the start of this episode, daswolfman88@gmail.com. Say it
Wolfman.
again. Yeah, say it
88
again.
at gmail.com.
Yeah, send us your story. We want to hear it.
If you have a strange story of a little creature, a little whatever, or a giant, whatever it may be, hit us up. Let us know. I mean, you know what? We're here. We're here to like try to get these stories out, and hopefully they'll inform, entertain, whatever the case may be.
And if you want anonymity, you got it. That's our first priority because we understand.
Now, make sure you like and subscribe on our channel on YouTube.
Definitely.
We definitely want people to tune in every week.
Come in and hear
Fridays
the
at 8 o'clock, we're going to be dropping them like it's hot.
Yeah.
Dropping them like it's hot.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, man, I tell you what, this has been really interesting because most people in general hear about these little creatures, but people write them off as just fairy tale.
See something in the corner of your eye, and you're just like, what was that? I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see it.
Yeah,
know?
Or they think, oh, I'm just seeing things or whatever. They write it off because, again, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. And then, of course, if they're out of sight, out of mind, you'll never think to look.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, hey, thanks a lot, folks. I'm glad you joined us. We'll see you next time.
Whatever part of the universe you're from, day or night, good day, sayonara.
Y'all have a good one.